Hello and welcome to Sentence Combining, the Craft and Resulting Competency. This is Sarah Livingston Flurkey. This is for reading 592. Here's you, teacher, knitting away, sentence combining. You're using a combination of Scarborough's reading rope and Little Miss DHT's writing rope. You're combining letters, words, vocabulary, background knowledge, phrases, clauses, sentences, and paragraphs, endeavoring to clothe your students with communication. In order to understand sentence combining, I'm going to cover 6 different areas: the definition, some of the research, theoretical principles, teaching applications, benefits, and a conclusion. What is sentence combining? Sentence combining is a fun, playful approach to language that will help writers experiment with different ways to arrange thoughts. In its simplest form, sentence combining is making one smooth, detailed sentence out of 2 or more shorter, choppy sentences. Because writing is a competence that encompasses fluency, comprehension, vocabulary, and background knowledge, these are all bound up in the skill of communication. Sentence combining is a tool which gives students access to fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary. Here's a little example. Jan ran. Very simple sentence I would dictate for my students. Then I would dictate this one. Jan ran quickly. They would write both. And then this one. Jan ran to the dock. Then I would ask my students to combine all 3 sentences into one without repeating anything. Here's maybe what they would come up with. Jan ran quickly to the dock. What does the research say? Well, since the 1960s, researchers have sought to help schools understand how to write syntactically mature sentences. In order to transmit thoughts effectively, writers proceed through several stages. They have to plan, draft, organize, and revise. At the same time, though, they have to consider handwriting, grammar, punctuation, and spelling. They simultaneously need to be aware of audience needs and genre requirements. Well, this is a boatload of information to process. And so the researchers have tried to figure out the best ways to help students with these. Chomsky practiced sentence combining based on the theories of grammar in 1957 and creating complex sentences from basic kernel sentence patterns. He used these in laboratory schools. In 1965, in the Hunt study, Carlson declared that schools should move toward mature writing patterns. And in 1979, Strunk and White highlighted the goal of making each word add something important to the meaning of a sentence. There has not been a preponderance of current research. Bruce Sadler, with the help of his various colleagues, has been the lead on what research there is. In his 2005 article introducing the idea of sentence combining, Sadler lays the groundwork. It was his book, Teacher's Guide to Effective Sentence Writing, which was my guide to other research. Unfortunately, the only other research articles I found on ERIC were written before the century change. It would be interesting to see this developed further in order to gain more understanding on the potential. What exactly are researchers talking about when they talk about sentence combining? At its base, sentence combining is a practice which allows students to make choices at the sentence level. It shows them how to say more using fewer words. It helps them practice part-to-whole learning and develop more language accuracy. The theoretical principles behind sentence combining first focus on what student writers need instruction in. They need instruction in formulating a clear understanding of what a written sentence actually is. They need instruction in understanding the limits that a simple sentence can afford, and they need to understand the syntactic options available. As I watch my students struggle, I appreciate this particular theoretical principle. Reducing cognitive strain as writers become more comfortable with the process of sentence formation. I don't introduce sentence combining until other more basic skills, things like letter formation, basic capitalization, punctuation, and spelling rules, are mastered. But when a student is ready to expand, sentence combining becomes routinized and automatic, thereby bringing about this principle. There are gains in syntactic fluency, and these lead to higher quality writing. Sentence combining can be used on a consistent, regular rhythm, taking 5 to 10 minutes per lesson. We begin with exercises that the teacher demonstrates, the I do portion. Then we use cued exercises, the we do. When we underline clues, we underline the word we want added. For example, Benny is a dog, the dog is happy. Those are two sentences I would dictate to my students, and I would underline happy. Then I would say to them, put these two sentences together without repeating. The sum sentence would be, Benny is a happy dog. Another option would be to put key words in parentheses. You might say, Benny is happy. The second sentence would be, he has a bone, with because in parentheses, signaling that the two will be connected with the parenthetical word. The sum sentence would be, Benny is happy because he has a bone. Eventually, these exercises are moved into the you-do approach, and they can be opened up more. At the secondary level, this would be breaking complex sentences up into simple ones, and the students could reunify. Using sentence combining activities as an opportunity to define terms is a great way to use teaching. I start with basic kernel sentences, learning what nouns and verbs are. Once the student has the basics of nouns, verbs, pronouns, conjunctions, we can move into more complex parts of speech. Here's some examples. In the first line, we'd be learning about nouns. Bob ran. Here's another sentence. Jan ran. Okay, can you put these two sentences together, making them into one sentence, but making your nouns compound? Or we could talk about verbs on the second line, using two different verbs and then combining them. Both of these also necessitate a conversation and lesson about conjunctions. Here's a more complex example. If you look at the green sentence at the bottom, you can see the complex sentence I had in mind. Teachers dismantle sentences so students can put them back together and understand construction. I'm assuming at this point that the students and I have been talking about complex sentences and compound sentences. So then I would break this sentence apart into these very short, choppy sentences and dictate them to my students. It would be their job to put them back together into one fine sentence. There is no right answer on the combination sentence. There's many ways they could put it together, and that's part of the fun of doing that. Whenever sentence combining activities are used, it is imperative that these steps be followed. The teacher must model the sentence combining. It's a frustrating activity if the student hasn't seen it done and hasn't done it with someone else. The activity also has to be scaffolded. There have to be small steps taken and not moved on until mastery has been achieved. And then independent practice is the final step. All of this is done with the student being active and feeling successful. When I use sentence combining, I always work on a foundation of the parts of speech so that students can use that language in their mastery. Students love to be able to use big words like noun, conjunction, complex sentence. It's very impressive to their parents, and that impresses them. The benefits of sentence combining are multitudinous. On the first level, the puzzle element of this activity helps students think outside themselves. A second benefit is that allowing students to play with the sentence parts allow them space to make judgments about their sentences. This stretches them to think about the audience of their writing and predict how the sentences will be received. The constant interaction with the written word, the language of grammar and punctuation, the conceptualizing of idea through text, All of these things help students become confident about punctuation. Sentence combining also fosters skill in revision. One of the other benefits that isn't mentioned much is that the sentence combining allows more subject interaction for the student because the practice sentences can provide content. Why not pull sentences from their biology or social studies text? Break the sentences down to their kernels and allow the students to build them into complex sentences via their knowledge of English syntax and whatever the secondary topic is. Lastly, in our benefits, sentence combining may improve reading fluency and comprehension. Sentence combining provides a sound medium for assessment of comprehension. There's reading comprehension, writing comprehension, topic comprehension. Sentence combining is a great way to assess your students' writing ability. By having students combine sentences, you can learn if they're transferring the skills to their connected writing activities. The assessment can vary depending on the skill focus, and each step can be assessed. The level of combination can also be assessed. It was difficult to find definitive studies proving that sentence combining makes for better writers outside of the Sadler book. Some researchers who found parts of it satisfying were Rhodes and Dudley Martin. They stated that sentence combining helps writers understand the choices available to them at the sentence level. Strong found that sentence combining practice helps students say more in fewer words. And Elbow found that sentence combining is both an exercise and it fits as the real thing of writing, which appeals to students. Sentence combining is an active developmental exercise that can be scaffolded within the student's ability. The sentences are best presented as puzzles with varying answers. The goals are grammatical correctness, capitalization, punctuation, and target structures, but the overarching goal is effectiveness in writing. I've used sentence combining in my tutoring, and I find it to be helpful on all the levels for which we've discussed. However, I've also found that the steps need to be much smaller, much more incremental, much more scaffolded than what I had found in Sadler's guidance. I will continue to work with students on sentence combining, but for many of my students, initially mastery of terms and mechanics need to be achieved. Once we get there, then we can use the sentence combining to make them better writers. Thank you very much for listening. Here are the references. And remember, you can, however, write a perfect sentence. Now and then, I have Gore Vidal.